Some of you may recognize this Toyota Avalon 2004. It has been here in the garage before. This time it's here for a ton of work. The primary thing is the timing belt and the water pump job, but we have a good amount of other things that need to be done. So let me pull all of the parts out of the trunk. All right, let's start off with the timing kit itself. It consists of the water pump, timing belt, tensioner bearing, idler bearing, hydraulic tensioner, and a water pump gasket. So you can see everything right here. We got 6 new spark plugs. We got brand new coolant. We got a brand new thermostat. Both of the belts are going to get replaced, as well as the upper and lower radiator hose. And this appears to be a temperature sensor. On the side of the timing cover, there's no markings right here on the sticker indicating when or if the timing belt has ever been replaced. Let's check the miles on this bad boy. We're at 141,659. So with that amount of mileage, I hope that the timing belt has been done once before, but who knows? I've seen cars go that long with the original belt. I guess we'll find out once we get in there. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and drain out the cooling system right now from the bottom of the radiator. I wanna start with the easier stuff first. And the reason for that is because when I'm working on multiple jobs, the last thing I want is that I'm working on the big job, the main job, and things go sideways, takes way more time than it has to, and I'm very frustrated. At that point, I say to myself, oh my God, I still have to do all the rest of that other work, and it snowballs out of control, if that makes any sense. Whereas if I knock out all the easy stuff first, and then the hard job gives me a little bit of trouble, even though I'm frustrated, at least I could say to myself, I just need to push through this and get this one part done, and I'll be done with this car. I could wrap it up, if that makes any sense. As you can see, I got the coolant draining into a pan right here. I was not expecting to see pink coolant come out this thing. I'm not saying that it's the wrong coolant. I'm just saying it just kind of threw me off guard. And I look at the new coolant here, and yeah, it's pink. So while that's draining, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this upper radiator hose. Remember, we're replacing it. All right, so this from factory, I think it might be like some type of foam, like insulator. And as soon as I touched it, it just shattered into 2 pieces. Watch, it's gonna shatter again. That's crazy. So Angel, if you're watching, I promise I'm not breaking stuff on your car. This stuff is just old and brittle, and it was gonna fall apart anyway. So I'm trying to move this clamp, and it doesn't really want to slide back. But if we were to go ahead and spray all this stuff with some silicone lubricant, give it a good douching with that, and look how easily it just slides past now. Okay, let's do the same thing for this one. Give it a few wiggles and a few twists and pulls, and you can see it comes right off. So the coolant is still draining at this thing. I got this upper section of the lower hose disconnected, so I'm about to slide underneath the car right now and get the lower end off of the radiator. So I got the lower radiator hose disconnected. As you can see, it's leaking, and here goes the clamp that was holding on that radiator hose. So needs a new clamp for that. So I think we got a little bit of a problem here. So here goes the new lower hose. The first thing I noticed is this end right here. That does not look normal. Doesn't look factory. They don't typically cut them at an angle like that, and that looks pretty rough, like someone just cut it with a blade. Then if we line it up next to the old one, line up this end because it looks nice and straight. Look how much shorter this end is. That's a lot, guys. That's not gonna fit. So that needs to get returned wherever it came from, or we just straight up need a different one. That's not gonna work. That sucks. Already running into problems. So I went looking through my container of plugs and caps. As you can see, I have a whole variety of them right there. And I found one that fits the lower port on the radiator. And the only reason for this is just to stop it from having a constant drip while I'm working on the car. That's all I really need. That way it buys me enough time until we could get the actual correct radiator hose that's gonna fit. All right, so the next thing I want to do is let's go ahead and get this cover off of here, and I want to get the spark plugs out of the engine. Typically I would just go ahead and pop in the new ones, but since we're doing the timing belt, typically when I'm doing anything timing related, if I'm removing the spark plugs, I like to leave them out. That way, once I got all the new timing components in place and it's time to manually turn the engine over by hand, of course, we don't have that compression that's going on inside the cylinders fighting us while we're trying to rotate the engine. And it'll rotate, well, it should rotate nice and smooth. And that way you could feel by hand if there's anything wrong and catch it right there. And it just makes it a lot easier when you're not fighting that compression. So let's get these spark plugs out. Hey, you guys ever notice how I bet you guys are like, oh, here he goes again, he's about to say something stupid. I promise I'm not. You ever notice how we find aliens to be like, oh, if they come here and they have 5 eyes or 3 arms, it's weird, it's crazy, it's spooky, right? And we're perfectly normal. Think about it. We have a freaking hole in our face that we shove food into. Think about that concept. Just step back and look at it. There is a hole in our face that we stuff food into. So if an alien came to this planet, and let's just say they have their hole directly on their stomach and they put food into their stomach, that makes sense, doesn't it? It makes perfect sense. They would see us as the weird aliens. Like, oh, look how creepy they are. They have their hole where they put their food on their face. Just think about that for a second. Go ahead and zip these off real fast. Of course, we're gonna knock out the easy ones first. Please don't break. And yes, it did. The little tab for the ignition coil snapped right off. Everything is old and brittle on this car. Let's see the second one. And guys, I'm not forcing it. I'm just doing what it's supposed to be done. And look, that one just snapped off as well. There's really no way around it. Watch, this one's gonna break off. All I'm trying to do is release that tab. And yep, that one just snapped right off. Everything's old and brittle on these cars. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So the ignition coils, whenever I pull them out, I like to put them back exactly where they came from. So these three, I would keep them in this same order. So far so good. There's no oil inside of the spark plug tubes. Now for anyone saying I could have avoided breaking the tabs off of these by coming in with a small pick and lifting it from the opposite side, that doesn't matter, guys. If they're gonna snap, they're gonna snap. Everything's just old and brittle. I've tried that method before. It makes no difference at all. So when it comes down to removing the spark plugs, I don't like to use power tools. I just do it by hand because I want to get a feel for, number one, is the spark plug loose? And number two, is it potentially cross-threaded or any thread galling? So I like to get a feel for it. Like, this to me felt a little bit looser than I would like it. But just by unthreading it, I could feel that the threads feel fine. I'm not feeling anything that seems to be weird. Spark plug looks pretty good. Engine seems to be running good, at least on this bank. I've got my snap-on extra long pick set. Let's see if we can lift it up from back here without actually snapping it off. And it still snaps. There isn't much you can do, guys. You can try whatever you want, and if plastic's old and brittle, it's gonna break. And before I get myself into trouble, I like to disconnect the negative battery post and put one of these red caps. It's the caps that come on a new battery whenever you buy them. I just tend to keep them, and they work really well for this. In case this terminal were to slip and make contact with the post again, just like that, it's not gonna make that connection. I got all of the spark plugs out, and of course the rear spark plugs really put up a fight. The front ones came out super easy, and each and every one of these, they be just in there super tight, and you can see the amount of corrosion on the threads. So yeah, just my luck. And then the bolt that holds on this ignition coil almost felt like it wanted to snap off. And if we take a closer look at it, you could see right there, like a quarter up, like there's some galling going on the threads. So I'm gonna run a thread dye over this to go ahead and fix the threads before I put it back on the car. Since I got the spark plugs removed, I don't want the chance of something falling inside the cylinder, so I found these little caps here in my collection, and they actually fit in here perfectly. They got a lip right around the top right here, so they slide into the spark plug tube, but then they stop right on that lip. They look like the little caps that come on oxygen sensors. Yeah, that's exactly what they are. Now the 3 rear cylinders, I'm not worried about those because it's covered by the manifold, and chances of something falling into them are very unlikely. The next step is, I think I want to go ahead and just change out the thermostat. I've never replaced a thermostat on one of these engines, so it looks like this water neck is connected to the thermostat housing, which leads back here. Oh my goodness, this looks like it's gonna be fun. All right, so I am picking at this. As you can see, the whole air box is out of the way. Remove this bracket to knock it down, and disconnected any connector I could get to, and you can see there goes our housing for the thermostat. I've already removed 2 of the bolts, which one of them the entire stud came out, and I think there's one more bolt or nut, I should be saying, underneath the housing. So let me get that last one, and this thing should pop off. And you're going to definitely need a magnet for this job because the nuts keep dropping. And of course, as soon as I turn off the camera, the water, I'm just going to call it the water inlet tube, popped right out. You can see the O-ring I was talking about. And with this off of the car, it looks like the actual housing itself has a little bit more movement. So look at that, popped right out. So that's what's holding it back, is that tube has to come off first. Here goes the thermostat housing. And of course the thermostat itself is still stuck onto the engine block. I'm going to be using this gear wrench prying tool. It's more like a long panel prying tool. You can see the end right there. So it's not made for like heavy duty use. It's just no different from this snap-on one. The only difference is, you know, it's really long. There we go. There goes the antifreeze. And of course the pan is never in the right place, right? There she goes, guys. She's a thick one. Wait, I can't really say she anymore. I mean, they, them is a thick one. All right, so time to do some cleaning. It looks like there is some sort of a gasket right there that needs to come off. And one thing I noticed with the upper radiator hose is if you line it up, this thing is way longer than it has to be. Who the hell is making these parts? It's crazy. So we may end up having to trim this one to get it to fit. You know, the aftermarket, it's not that hard. You take the original part, right? And here's a weird concept. You copy it. Just copy. That's it. Don't make any alterations. It blows my mind. So I got the parts laid out here. And as you can see, the temperature sensor is right here on the housing. So that's nice and easy because we got to replace that. We got a brand new one. You could see the O-ring on the water outlet. It goes into here. So I'm going to have to clean up that surface. And yeah, here goes the seal or the gasket for the actual thermostat housing where it seals up against the block. And guys, don't reuse any of this stuff, any of the O-rings. Replace this stuff unless you want a comeback or for it to just start leaking immediately and then have to take it right back apart. Go ahead, take a chance, but not me. These things are going to get replaced. We'll go ahead and find and get a hold of those gaskets and O-rings and we'll be all set. But it seems like every path I take, I hit a dead end. So you can see I got all my parts laid out on the ground here. And we're back in the game. I went out to a few different stores. So I got in the zone, AutoZone, and I got advanced because they did not have all these parts in one spot. So here goes the radiator hose. And you can see how much longer it is than the one that's cut. But what's funny is if you line up down here, it's even longer than the original one. So we're going to have to cut it. That's what happened. Whoever had this before, they freaking cut it because it was way too long. And then they realized that they cut too much off of it. So they just returned it to the store. What a bag move, right? Like, screw the next guy. I just want my money back because I messed it up. So that's exactly what happened here. So not a big deal. Just make sure you cut it in the correct spot. And that's it. So we got that taken care of. Let's see. There goes the gasket for the thermostat housing. Here goes the gasket for the water outlet or O-ring, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of the same thing. Yes, I took both of the old ones with me. Whenever you're looking for stuff like this, it really helps to just take the old ones with you. And I picked up some clamps for the radiator hose because we saw that the lower one disintegrated. So let's jump back in this. I'm really happy now that I can wrap up part of the job I started rather than just moving on. Let's go ahead and give the water outlet a quick cleaning before we put the new O-ring on it. Normally I would just put this in my parts washer, but I don't got that thing up and running yet. All right, that looks pretty good to me. I'm just gonna use some silicone lubricant right here. This edge right here isn't that sharp, but I could see if you're not careful how you could mess up this O-ring. There you go, slid on perfectly. So on this end where the radiator hose is gonna go, if you see any type of corrosion, go ahead and clean it off. I like to use, this is basically like a Scotch-Brite pad on my Dremel. And just use this to go around. Basically clean up any imperfections and make it nice and smooth so that the new radiator hose is going to seal on that. Over to the thermostat housing, you can see this is where it's going to meet up against the block and where that sealing surface is. This is where that new gasket is going to sit, the one we just picked up today. So I like to use the white 3M bristle brush for this. It's safe for aluminum, so it's not going to remove it. It's just going to remove the corrosion and basically give us a nice sealing surface. Look at the finish we have now. Looks really good. I'm satisfied with that. It's going to seal nicely. And now we got to clean inside of here where the inlet tube is going to go with that O-ring on it, the other O-ring that we just got today. So you can see there's some nasty like corrosion and dirt inside of there. I know it doesn't look great, but it does look better. And if I run my finger inside of here, it's completely smooth all the way around. I have no doubt that that new O-ring is going to seal. So I decided to check the sensor first, and that's a good thing because these sensors are not the same. Maybe this is for a different sensor. Maybe this one goes on the radiator. I don't know, but it's definitely not the same as this sensor right here. So removing this would have been a mistake. Yeah, look how nice that bad boy looks. Anyway, let's not worry about that. The real problem here is the old gasket that was on the block. Yeah, I had to peel it away and it was stuck on there pretty good. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but towards the top, you see that black stuff? That's chunks of the old O-ring stuck to the metal. And that's not good. If you don't address something like that, that's a guaranteed leak. And what sucks is, look at that. It's way back inside of there. This is gonna be a nightmare. Why me? Why? Believe it or not, but it's actually more than an hour later. And yes, I've been trying this whole time to get that gasket material off of there. Hopefully I could get you guys a shot of it. And you can see it looks pretty dang decent. It's not perfect, but that's more than good enough. I got like 95% of it, and that's good enough for it to seal. So what did I spend over an hour doing? Well, I tried things like a razor blade, a pick, which you got to be really careful with these things because you don't want to scratch the surface. That'll create a leak. I even tried coming at it with my little propane torch here to try to heat up the rubber and like burn it off, but that wasn't happening because as soon as the flame hits that cold engine block, it just creates condensation, and then it creates like a barrier of water around it, and it'll never melt. And then I tried things like using my little die grinders here with some like Scotch-Brite pad, and that doesn't work. What ended up working for me is this thing right here. This is a tool that you would use to clean around wheel studs before you put on a rotor. Well, let me show you. Basically, if you're gonna put on a rotor, you use this tool, and there's an adapter, and it goes in like this, and it cleans all the way around just like that. So obviously I didn't use it with any power tool. All I simply did was held it in my hand and just kept going around the entire circle manually. Yeah, that took like 10-15 minutes doing that. But what's nice is this thing's pretty aggressive, and you can see it has a sharp corner right there. So I was able to get right in there, right where that gasket material is at, enough to clean it out. And over a careful inspection, it doesn't look like I gouged the metal or anything like that. This was literally the only thing I could come up with to get this job done, and it was driving me crazy. Talk about a real time killer, right? It just sinks so much time into trying to figure this out. And you know what's the way around this that a hack would do, or a person who's in a rush? silicone, right? It's funny because my wife came out here and I'm trying to explain to her how I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place and I can't figure out how to clean this gasket material on something that's so far inside of there. And she's like, well, can't you just put silicone on it? I'm like, no. You don't use silicone and stuff like this. Do it right. Even if it takes time to get it off, figure it out. So that's what we did. You saw how it looks. It looks pretty decent. Let's grab the new gasket, new parts, and see if everything fits. So the new gasket fit the thermostat nicely. It's got a groove in the center. You just got to make sure you push it into its groove and make sure it's even all the way around. You see the little pin up top for air to escape, little jiggle pin. Make sure it's at the 12 o'clock position. So be aware of that little jiggle pin. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Boo, 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 boo. Sorry guys, I'm horrible at this. Let's go ahead and get this inside of here. That looks good right there. And here goes the thermostat housing that we cleaned up before. Look how nice that looks. And it should seal 100%. Let's go ahead and get this installed. We are ready to put this part back on. It's going to go in through the front right here. So I got some Sil Glide and I want to put it on the new O-ring right here so it doesn't go in dry and potentially roll it or ruin it in any way. All right, let's see if it'll go in nice and smooth. Just gonna rotate it a little bit to get it to walk in. Oh, that was so nice, guys. It popped in. If you know, you know. There's one 12 mil bolt holding down the water outlet tube. I'm just gonna snug it up. That's good enough. And this thing is ready to accept the brand new radiator hose. So I got the lower hose connected to the radiator. Still gotta go down there and tighten up the clamp. And we got the clamp up here. As you can see, I went ahead and cleaned up the clamp only because it looked nasty. We got a new hose. Why not clean up the clamp, right? So whenever I'm installing things like this, I like to spray silicone lubricant where it's going to go and a little bit inside the tube, and that'll help it to really just slide on. I did have to shorten the top half of this hose because it was way too long and it was causing the hose to get pushed into the radiator fan. So that's not good, right? Right there. And there we have it. Clamp is exactly where I wanted. Everything looks good. Let's go underneath the car and tighten down the clamp. Now the reason why I chose to put this OEM spring type clamp on top is because up here they're a lot safer. The ones on the bottom tend to rot away, as we already saw the original one did. So it's why I put the stainless steel clamp on the bottom. So here is that lower clamp. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten it down. Should be good enough. Don't want to kill it. All right, guys, so that's going to be it for tonight. It's about 9 p.m. I'm just about done, meaning this video is just about done. So, of course, there's going to be a part 2. And in part 2, we're going to tackle the timing job. So stay tuned. And like always, thanks for watching.